Hello, Happy New Year, and welcome to Stuart Saturday. I'm Andrea Zuvich, the 17th century lady, hostess of this episode. Um, I'm so happy that so many of you enjoyed our first ever episode last month on December 16th, 2023. And I had my guest historian and friend, Liam Maloney, join me. We received lots of positive feedback, which is why we're here today. For our first episode of 2024, we will be talking with historian Mark Turnbull, who will be chatting with me about Charles I and more. So please stay with us for that. We are streaming live on X, Facebook, YouTube, and Patreon. And to start off, I have a couple of news items I would like to share with you, if I may. This week, I found out that my biography of Barbara Villas is now available for pre-order in the UK. And here's the cover. I'm so excited. This is one of the most famous depictions of Barbara by Peter Lilly, who found in her a great muse. I remember seeing this image in books when I was a teenager, and then I was able to see it in person at the National Portrait Gallery in London. And it's a striking image. In it, she exudes this languid luxuriousness, which belies her tempestuous nature. I love it. John Wilkinson created this cover design, and he also designed the cover for my previous book, Sex and Sexuality in Stuart Britain. I'm very grateful for that, and for the fact that historian Gareth Russell has very kindly written the foreword for this book. I'm also thrilled that the back cover quotes come from historical fiction author Deborah Swift and historian Charles Spencer. Both of these people, all three of them, generously gave their time to read and review the book in its early stages. So published by Pen and Sword History, this book is set for a release here in the UK in July 2024. And I'll post about worldwide and USA release dates when that information becomes available. And you'll find the link to pre-order on my social media pages, if you're interested. And also, I'm delighted to announce that I will also be participating in the Stuart's Online History Festival in March. And British History Tours is running this festival. And some of you attended the wonderful Stuart Summit in 2022. I will be giving a talk entitled Royal Mistresses, the Tenuous Power of Beauty in the Stuart Court, and taking part in the live Q&A session on the 24th of March, all being well. Your ticket will give you access to historian talks, the live event with the speakers, a free prize draw, and a closing just for fun quiz. Tickets can be purchased now, during which time you can take advantage of the early bird pricing. And we'll provide the link on my social media pages as well. So hopefully you can sign up, and I'm sure you'll have a lovely time. And that's pretty much all from me, news-wise. So next up, we are going into our interview. It's time to greet our guest historian. He is the author of 4 works of historical fiction set during the British Civil Wars. He is also a well-known history podcaster with his show, Cavalier Cast, The Civil War in Words. And he is most recently the author of the non-fiction history work, Charles I's Private Life, recently published by Pen and Sword History. He is a popular figure in the Stuart history community and on Stuart Saturday on X, where you can follow him under his handle at 1642 author. Without further ado, joining us live from Durham, England, please welcome Mark Turnbull. Hi, Mark. Thank you for being here today.
Hi, Andrea. Thank you. And great news about your book.
Oh, thank you so much.
It's an honor to be part of it.
Yes, and I think we have a great publisher, and it's nice to work for the same company. So.
Oh, sorry. Honored to be part of Stuart Saturday Live.
Oh, yes. Yeah, thank you so much. um, so, Mark, we've known each other for a few years on Twitter. Well, formerly Twitter, now X. And I was so honored to be one of your guests on your podcast. And we talked about Henrietta Maria. Um, and it looks like your interest in the Stuart period began at a young age when you visited a historic site when you were 10. Um, and I think, yeah, you gave us a childhood drawing from that time. And if we can see that, that's great. Oh, that's fantastic. This is what you drew after that visit. I think we can
The
all
one on
agree
the
it's
left,
adorable.
Andrea, is
Oh, the one
mine.
on the left. Fantastic. Well, could you please tell us about that experience? It seems to have had a lifelong uh, consequence if it were, you know. Yes, please.
You could definitely say that. Yeah. So that's right. It was Helmsley Castle in North Yorkshire, which is steeped in Civil War history. And I have to admit it was the gift shop that was responsible. So, like any kid, I was looking for something to buy. Always loved history, and there was a pack of cards there, and each one portrayed the monarchs of England from the conquest, um, with details of their reigns on the back. So anyway, I bought this pack of cards, looked through them, a bit like a royal lineup. And King Charles I stood out. Liam Van Dyke, the colours, the claws, the formality of the portrait, the pose. And then just reading about his reign on the back and finding out that this very image of a king was executed, really just sparked a passion to find out more about him and the civil wars, and that's just never gone away.
Yeah, that's amazing. And it's so wonderful how even now you can encourage children to learn about history and historical figures and places like where you visited and all these other wonderful places with run by English Heritage and Historic Royal Palaces and National Trust. They really bring history to life. And I know I go all over the place visiting historic sites with my daughter, and it's really exciting for them to be in these old historic places, and they can get inspired by seeing an image on a pack of cards and a painting or a statue. Not to go too much off on a tangent here, but when we went to Osborne House, my daughter was fascinated by a statue, and we ended up looking into the sculptor and where he was from and other works that he made. So it was very much another example of how that can inspire a child to want to learn more. And for you, it's developed into a passion and a career. So it's wonderful.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, obsession. I mean, but you're right. You're right about the spark. It can be just anything. A good friend of mine said that she, when she was little, it was actually a reenactor taking off his hat and bowing to her, and that was it. She was hooked on the period. So and the reenactment community and the societies are brilliant for bringing that to life.
Yes, that's wonderful. And I believe you were involved in some reenactment, weren't you, in a reenacting group?
I was, yeah. So 17, I think I was when I joined.
Oh, that's nice.
A beanpole, considering I was a pikeman, this huge pike. And but it was just amazing, the sealed knot in Newcastle's regiment, just sort of
Fantastic.
living and breathing it.
Yeah. Oh, that brings it. We were talking about how you can bring history to life, but that brings it to a whole other level, doesn't
Yeah.
it? And you can be in a tent. Did you camp out, make your
We
own
did.
food and that sort of thing? Oh, brilliant. I really want
Yeah.
to do that, but I don't think I can. Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, I must admit, I was zonked after the battle. It was the first battle, and it was quite a major muster. And uh,
Ooh,
my dad was saying, for example, he went out at night and he heard the singing around the campfire and the old songs, and he said it was just as though you'd stepped, into the past.
that's
Amazing.
brilliant. That's wonderful. And wonderful experiences for all involved, not just the reenactors, but the spectators who go and see that. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
good for everyone, I
definitely.
think. So many in our audience know about Charles I and his execution in 1649. Much is made of his life in the lead up to and during the civil wars and his subsequent death. It was such a momentous event in this nation's history. So that makes sense. And you brilliantly bring this to life in the opening of your book about Charles I. And I thought it was reading like a novel. I was gripped. It
Oh,
was
that's
gripping.
great.
Yes.
Thank you.
So yeah, and I read the ebook, and as I said earlier, I received, thanks to Pen and Sword, we received the hardback, and it's beautiful. It's absolutely gorgeous, and there are black and white images inside, and it's a really good read. So
Thank you. Oh, that's
thank you for
great.
that.
Great to know.
um, in your book, as the title implies, states, delves into Charles's personal life. For those who aren't acquainted with King Charles I, could you please give us a bit of background about who he was and why is he famous? Why do we need to know about him?
Yeah. Well, bit of background about Charles. So he was the son of King James VI of Scotland, who later became James I of England, and Anna of Denmark, who was a sister of Christian IV. His paternal grandmother was Mary, Queen of Scots. And Charles was born in Dunfermline on the 19th of November 1600. He was the last crowned monarch to be born in Scotland. He had two well-known elder siblings, so Prince Henry, who died aged 18, and Princess Elizabeth, who later married the Elector Palatine and became Elizabeth of Bohemia, or we might recognise her as the Winter Queen. After his brother's death, bit of a potted history, so he became king in 1625. And really, from that point onwards, there was a big drive for change, a real revolution in sort of politics and also the ways of worship. And there was also a struggle from the very start, in that the traditional lifetime revenues for a monarch were not granted to Charles. And usually they'd been pretty much hereditary. And that strangled his government from the start. So his reign, led into the civil wars in 1642. That very much overshadows everything, including the man himself, and not just the monarch, which is what I focused on. But why should we know about him? Really, just because of all of this momentous change, these critical key events. And when he lost these wars, he was brought to trial by a select commissioners and executed. And it's that really that most people do know about Charles. It's the story about the cold January day when he wore two shirts to avoid
Yes.
shivering from the cold, in case it was portrayed as being from fear.
Yes, these are things that are very much part of the whole myth about him, the sort of story that has evolved around him,
Yeah,
and the final interview with his children, Henry and Elizabeth. That's quite quite a poignant
yeah,
episode there, and we'll be talking about Henry and Elizabeth later on. Um, but many people don't know that Charles wasn't supposed to become king at all. As you mentioned, he had an elder brother, Henry Stuart, Prince of Wales, who died in his teens. And that shocked everyone, didn't it? Because he was such a dynamic, strong prince. We know, of course, that this suddenly made Charles heir. But in other respects, how did that impact him?
It changed his life and his existence really entirely. I mean, Henry, I found during the research, we talk about Henry's death, that there were stark similarities between Henry's funeral and that of the late Diana, Princess of Wales. And people were devastated. Henry was young, handsome, athletic. He embodied all of those hopes for the future that everybody had. And his funeral, when it wound its way through London to Westminster Abbey, the crowds wept. They were inconsolable. Sir Symonds D'Ewes recorded it was the first public grief that ever I was sensible of, so general as even women and children partook of it. Henry's called heaven and earth's delight. Our rising sun is set. This young man who really outshone everybody, including Charles, outwardly outshone. Yet you've got, we know how walking behind their mother's coffin affected Princes William and Harry. Well, Harry's explained the trauma that he still held, but for Charles, what's very, very interesting to consider is that 12-year-old Harry was supported by his grandfather, his uncle, led the nation in mourning. Back in 1612, the 11-year-old Charles walked those streets, leading that funeral cortege and 2,000 mourners. But he was the only member of the royal family present. This 11-year-old led the nation.
Can't imagine.
His father, it's astounding.
Yeah.
His father was distraught and had left London. His mother, his sister, took to their chambers. They barely ate. And whatever we think of him as a monarch, he had an extremely strong constitution to shoulder that level of responsibility from such a young age. And
certainly,
the moment that Henry died, that was just life-changing. He had to be Henry. That's what people wanted.
Indeed, because it wasn't as though Henry had a long illness that they were preparing for. He was quite a fit, active, healthy, strapping young man, and there was no reason to suppose that he was going to die. And it was just shocking, so much in every possible way. So that's it's quite something. So thank you for that. Charles was also one of the intended victims of the gunpowder plot. And I loved how you have a chapter in your book describing the situation. Could you explain to our audience what that was all about? I mean, why was he going to be one of the victims? What was their plan?
Yeah, well, so when Charles's father, James VI of Scotland, inherited the English throne as James I, well, Catholics really hoped that there could be an end to persecution. But at the same time, the Protestants hoped that James would continue the status quo and the laws that were in place that really suppressed Catholicism. But James was a new ruler. He really wanted to be a peacemaker. He tried to sit on the fence. All that brought was anger on both parts. So Catholic hopes were dashed. They were really left with nothing to lose but attempting to kill him, and move the regime on. And the Protestants were left increasingly suspicious of James's behaviour, so they demanded that he crack down more on Catholics. So the result was a band of Catholics coming together, plotting James's death in the most spectacular. So they decided to wait until the state opening of Parliament, and they would blow the king, the nobility, bishops, knights, gentry, judges, all to kingdom come. So yeah, as devastating as it was the plague that actually was the Stuart saviour by causing a delay.
It's ironic.
Yeah, it is.
Yes, but one of the plotters presumably sent warning. the Mount Eagle letter.
Yeah, that's right.
So that sort of set the wheels in motion for people to have a look and see what was
Yeah,
going on underneath. And that's what happened. That's how they uncovered everything.
yeah.
But it's crazy because we think about Charles I, but we tend to not remember that he could also have been a victim for the gunpowder
The,
plot. The
you,
connections are
you,
there, and yeah.
yeah, you're right there. Yeah, because Thomas Percy was scouting out Charles's movement. He spoke to his household on the 1st of November, just days before, asking, what's the boy's movements, who looks after him, who attends to him, and I suppose you asked what was the purpose. Well, it was really to eliminate the king and all of his male heirs, put his daughter on the throne, marry her to a good Catholic, and found a new Catholic dynasty. So, there was really touching moment in James when James was talking to the Venetian ambassador in the aftermath, in the week after. Little Charles wandered into the room, and James, interrupted the audience, lifted the boy up, and said, this poor boy's innocence has more power with God than the perfidious malignity of men. And there's no doubt that Charles would have been fully aware of his fate. I think. I look at my 5-year-old daughter, and I think, yeah, she knows what's going on.
They do, don't they?
Yeah.
But it's quite something. Wow. Um, yeah. So the next thing is we we're going to talk about how Charles was imprisoned in Carisbrooke Castle, and that's on the Isle of Wight. And I know you visited before, and here's an image from my visit there, which was last winter, a year ago already. And it's an incredible place, and you could be in the same area where Charles I was imprisoned. Do you remember it at all from when you visited?
Yeah, I do. I mean, it was about 30 years ago, and I'd love to go again. But
Mm-hmm.
exactly as you say, amazing place.
Yeah.
I mean, I was going to say, it's such a confined space as well. It held the king for a year, so it's so easy to imagine him walking those walls or using the
Indeed.
bowling green, the
Yes.
espionage and escape attempts.
Yes, and it's so incredible because they have the rooms and they have that bowling green, and you could see if you go above the bowling green, there's a great view, especially as well as if you're walking around the perimeter, and it's really good. So if any of you have a chance to go and visit there and you love Stuart history, I really recommend it. It's wonderful. And I found it really moving to be in the same areas. And his children, Henry, Duke of Gloucester, and Elizabeth, they had both been imprisoned there as well later. So I have an image of the bedroom, and this is the room in which Charles was imprisoned. And he attempted to escape at one point, but he got stuck. Got
Yeah,
stuck in the window. So that didn't work. Um, Unfortunately, the original window was replaced in the Victorian period, but that was the room, apparently.
yeah,
Um, yeah. For those who are not well acquainted with Charles I, he was married to a lady called Henrietta Maria, and she was a French princess. She was let's see, to make it easier for people, I think we'll go with she was sister of Louis XIII, who you might best know as the king in The Three Musketeers. And she was the aunt of Louis XIV, the sun god. Yay! Um, The sun king, not sun god. That's me thinking about the Egyptian history I was doing with my daughter earlier. um, yes. Um, so, yes, we have this lovely image here of Charles I with his wife Henrietta Maria. And she was a controversial figure because she was a Roman Catholic, she was foreign, and people thought that she was a bit, shall we say, meddlesome?
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's right. I mean, that's always been an accusation, leveled, and
Yes.
I think
Yes.
there is some truth in it. But I think Leander Delisle as well has recently
Yes.
raged on History Rage about that.
Yes. But in terms of what we think of her, that people have been passing this down.
Yeah.
That but yes, if you want to have a different view, I would definitely recommend Leander Delisle's books. Well, all of them, really. They're all good. um, yes. But as for Jane Horwood, the royalist secret agent who dutifully served Charles, she was quite an interesting figure. She had an awful husband. I believe he was abusive to her. Um, and it seems likely that her relationship with Charles developed into something beyond the duty of subject to sovereign. There was a romantic, or at least perhaps a sexual element to their relationship, as proven in Charles's letter to her, in which he mentions he would like to have a chance to have relations with her. We know that Charles was not known for being a philanderer, unlike his sons, Charles II and James II. Um, what do you think was the true nature of their relationship?
Such a good question. Such a good question. I think I suppose I don't think we'll know 100% for
Mm,
sure, but as you say, in some of the surviving letters, there's undoubtedly a very close bond. And I was thinking about this. There has to be two scenarios, doesn't there? There has to be either a sexual relationship. Charles was cut off. He was in solitary confinement a lot of the time. He hadn't seen his wife for 4 years. There
mm,
was a bit of a tension between them. She wanted him to sell out on conscience, church. He refused to compromise and break that coronation oath. So there was a tension. He's rarely receiving letters from the Queen or his son, the Prince of Wales. He's complaining to them about that, imploring Prince Charles to write more. And he's cut off from the pivotal events that are going on outside in his kingdoms. He's
mm.
frustrated. He thinks that he might be murdered in a corner. And Jane was the key to the outside world. She put her life on the line, smuggled communications through. So it's possible that he fell in love. It's possible that
Mm,
it could have been a fling, but it would be the only recorded infidelity in a strong love and marriage.
yeah.
Um, or I think the second option, it could be a ruse. Charles implies that he's having a sexual relationship with Jane. The jailers believe it. It doesn't seem so unusual to see them together, for her to be smuggled in. The,
Ah, yes.
the captor,
Makes sense.
his captor, Robert Hammond, might have thought, well, actually, I'm absolutely sick of the king engaging in escape attempts. If this woman, stops him from doing that or occupies his attention, great. And meanwhile, she's smuggling out letters. She's taken out the writings that he's doing. He's people are attesting seeing him writing every night on what became Icon Basil. The smuggled out of Carisbrooke to the capital. So yeah, it's open, and I wouldn't rule out entirely that it could be a little bit of a ruse.
Yeah, well, that's very interesting. That's the first time I've ever heard that theory, and I think that that's rather credible. It just makes sense to
Yeah,
me. I mean, I think that you might be onto something there. So yeah, it's something to think about.
yeah.
Definitely.
They were extremely indiscreet if it was meant to be a secret liaison, I suppose.
Mm, right.
Uh,
Okay. Well, definitely something to consider. Yes.
yeah,
Um, and Charles I is still a sort of Marmite-like figure. There are those who hate him and those who love him very much. I've personally found it very difficult to find anyone with a balanced view about him, and I think you've managed to do it.
Brilliant. Oh, that's
It's
good.
just because you have to. I do think it's important to try to see the good and the bad in every historical figure, not just say, oh, it's just a catalog of bad things or everything they did was largely great, because we are innately complex beings. We have flaws and we have wonderful qualities, and I think sometimes some people might forget to do that when they're writing. For example, I read some things when I was researching for Barbara Villas, and some of them are completely scathing. There's absolutely nothing good about her at all. And there are others who say, oh, yeah, she's really, really amazing. And so there are good and bad aspects, and that I think it's important for a biographer and historian to try to get that blended, to try to show a balance if possible.
Yeah.
I mean,
No, I agree.
perhaps there are some that you can't do that for, but I think, yeah, by and large.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you're spot on. I think that's what's often forgotten, that he was a person like anyone with faults and foibles, but courage and charisma. On the one hand, he's reviled by the victors of the Civil War, and he's blamed for everything.
Yep.
But then he's
Everything.
venerated at the creation. Then he saw between the two opposites, martyr, murderer. But I think modern times, the decline of the Church of England, the balance then is easy to tip to the slant of tyrant, because the martyrdom for the church, it doesn't stand out as much as it did 200 years ago, and that's when sort of perceptions can get skewed, especially with those two polar opposites.
Yes.
He was a reserved man, and that's getting to the heart of the man himself, and not just looking at the monarch. Because with the monarch, if you look at him as a king, you absolutely can go down the two routes. Looking at him as a man, it opens up a lot of different sort of options. It opens up even understanding about why sort of events happened, or why he did or didn't do something. He didn't marry 6 times, didn't butter his way through his opposition, so he's easily overshadowed really by history, and he's a victim
Yes.
of his own success. He's a formal, austere monarch who wanted to portray that, and that's what we tend to see.
Yes. And this formality that he so wanted to cultivate in his court, it wasn't so different from other royal courts in Europe, was it? I mean, I think the Spanish court at the time was far more rigid and formal, for one example.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that's
And
what he sort of modeled it on as well.
yes, because he had a rip-roaring adventure, didn't he? He went, was it 1623 that he went off with the first Duke of Buckingham, um,
Did
George
yeah.
Villiers, and they went in incognito, and they had this epic adventure that didn't go really well, but they went to Spain to try to have Charles woo the Spanish Infanta. Wasn't that was quite a sort of
Oh, meant.
lad's adventure, wasn't it?
It was, it was such an adventure, and I think that really sort of took him out of the confines of sort of his father's court, and sort of saw the world a bit more. But behind it, you just can't underestimate the fact that for 10 years he's had this match shoved on him constantly. He's inherited that from Henry. This will he, won't he, will they, won't they, the Spanish dangle a carrot, and then the draw it back. And in the end, you've got the Stuart Britain just sort of really humiliated on the world stage with it, neutralised. And this was an attempt to just grasp the bull by the horns. Let's go there and put them to the test. Are you going to marry or not? And
Yeah.
yeah, the answer was no, but
All that for
it
nothing.
got an answer, and
Yes.
and that led to war. So well,
Ooh,
yeah,
well, but on the way to Spain, I believe it was on the way to Spain, he went to the French court, and I believe Henrietta Maria was there, so he might have met her at that time. And her sister was at the Spanish court. So all these different royal families were connected to one another at one point, and
yeah,
so it's all connected, all of it. Um, during the course of your research, um, were were you able to find? Uh, let's see. Did you find it difficult to find the truth when you were going through archives? Because it is a highly polarizing topic, as we discussed.
yeah.
I mean, you went to the National Archives, you went to Lambeth Palace, didn't you? Yep.
Yes, yeah, that was
So
the first
that
place I went to.
that's incredible. So uh,
Yeah, it was phenomenal. I mean, that was the first time I'd really got into archives, and it was
yeah,
just amazing to sort of hold these documents and interpret them and sort of put it all together and build a picture. And
yes,
yeah, fantastic.
that I find that some of the most exciting parts of the research, to have your clean hands on on
Yeah,
documents, and just to touch it. It's tangible history.
yeah,
Again, bringing it to life. It's all about that, bringing it to life, and trying to understand the thought processes and motivations of people in the past. And I think you touched upon this in your book, how um, it's important to try to avoid, if possible, avoid putting our own 21st century biases on things.
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah,
And
yeah, definitely.
yeah, because who said it? The past is another country.
Yeah,
It's different. There are things that we still understand. We can understand grief and the happiness that some felt, love, all these human feelings. Um, we understand some of their motivations for war, but we don't really tend to understand their outlook on life sometimes. Um, we don't know, we tend to forget about how they didn't have electricity and it was dark at night. There wasn't. It's
yeah.
a totally different thing. Um,
It's like
and
our modern logic kicks in, doesn't it? And you think, why on earth would they do that, or how could he have done that?
yeah,
You know,
and why
but
did they eat that? I mean, it was. It's not like they had a supermarket where you could go and get whatever you want.
yeah,
So it's different. It was very much more hand to mouth and living with nature in many respects. You had to prepare for winter. You had to, um, you know, if you could, grow your own crops and everything. So it was very different from
yeah.
what many of us have to, uh, enjoy these days. It's easier now.
Definitely, and I think that's part of the problem with Charles I, and I suppose with any sort of monarch in history.
Mm,
It's easy to look at him and think, well, nowadays, that's absolutely nonsense. Why on earth would anyone believe such a thing? Well, actually, back then there was some really devout beliefs in this.
yes.
How can we sort of say, well, why didn't he just give in or grant that away? Well, that was the crux of the issue between him and Henrietta Maria.
Mm,
Um, there's so much pull at play in that one man that it's very hard for anyone even to get into that, because he's kind of alone, isn't he? He's a 17th century monarch with
mm,
different responsibilities and beliefs and understandings about how God is acting towards him and his country. Um, that it's hard to understand sometimes some of the decisions that he then made. But I suppose that's the difficulty, isn't it? Just making that more accessible so that can be brought to the table, really. So you can, it's not just as clear cut as saying, oh yeah, butcher or martyr. That's the thing.
Yeah,
It's actually,
I
well,
agree.
let's look.
Yeah.
The Lambeth Palace you mentioned there. I mean, one of the lovely finds, and I didn't find this until I'd got back and I was sort of digesting some of the documents, and it was a draft letter by Charles's secretary when he was a teenager, and it was just lovely. There's
Wow.
one day I was looking at it again, the image, and then I realised, hang on a minute, there's part of this that is in a different handwriting. And that was Charles as a teenager amending the
Wow.
draft letter. And it's only
That's
when
amazing.
and just that in itself said so much, because it amended the title that was being used towards his mother. And it was something from my own dear mistress, which is what he'd usually addressed her as. He'd crossed that out and put madam. And that
Oh,
wasn't anything bad. That was just him as a maturing teenage boy thinking, well, I'm going to call him my only dear or my one dear mistress, But the letter itself is very loving. But you can sort of see then the changes in Charles, just by that one addition.
wow. Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah. The thrill of finding something in the archives. Wow, that's great.
yeah,
You you live in Durham, and that is in northern England. For those who are not acquainted where that is, and that's about 2 hours north from where I live in Bolsover, near Chesterfield, in the East Midlands. Are there any historic places in your local area with Stuart connections that you would like to recommend to the viewers today, please?
yeah. Well, I think first and foremost it has to be Durham Cathedral, World Heritage Site, the castle itself, and apart from the castle got hosted many people during that period. The cathedral was inspected by Charles while he went north to his Scottish coronation. So he was given orders for
Wow.
tidying up the cemetery outside and the burial grounds and things where ad hoc tenements had been built in the graveyard, pulled them down. But then under Palace Green, which is the square between the castle and the cathedral, there were bodies found of Scotsmen that were defeated by Oliver Cromwell at Dunbar.
Wow.
So they were
And that's
forced marched from Dunbar to Durham and held prisoner in the cathedral. So there was disease, malnourishment, mistreatment, and their bodies were found extended in a cafe. And there's a plaque there to
incredible.
them now. So yeah,
Wow. Well,
lots of amazing history.
I'd love to go there. My husband went to university up in Durham, but he's never taken me. I'd love to go there. I think we'll have to
Raby
push
Castle.
that. Sorry?
There's another called Raby Castle.
Oh,
That's
yes.
magnificent and plenty for kids to do. Home of the Vane family in the 17th century.
Oh, that's perfect.
Possible residence it was mooted as for Charles as a young man in the aftermath of the gunpowder plot, which I didn't realise. So yeah, lots of
Oh,
unknown connections.
excellent. Oh, well, looks like we're going to have to go north. That'd be a nice visit. Yeah. Thank you. That's fantastic. Next, I'd just like to see. I'm always curious about how different authors go about their work. What's your writing routine? Are you, I don't know, a several cups of coffee sort of person, or do you write by hand or only on the computer? Do you listen to any specific music to get you into the writing mood?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm definitely not a coffee person. I don't like coffee. Definitely can't write hand notes.
Okay.
I know somebody who writes it all out by hand and then corrects it. I can't do it. It has to be on the computer. Um, uh, and then what else did you say as well? Sorry.
Um, do you listen to any specific
Music.
music to get you? into
Yes, I
a
do.
writing mood?
Yeah, it could be anything. So, writing 17th century, it could be 17th century music, it could be 80s music. So very different. Even sort of, I've listened to battle music, battle themed music when I'm writing battle scenes. Just to sort of
Like from soundtracks? Like
yeah,
from film
soundtracks.
soundtracks?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I like doing that too. I think that's really
Yeah.
helpful. Yeah.
But touch wood. I mean, I'm actually quite lucky in that I can sort of settle down and then start to write. And sometimes I actually forget to listen to music, and I'll write. But I always find it's better, I think, when I do listen, especially when I'm editing. Definitely listen to music when I'm
Oh,
editing.
nice. Great. Okay, so what are your plans going forward? Is there any project in the works that you can share with us? Maybe.
Yes, there definitely is. So
Yay!
I think you might like this one, Andrea. So a biography of Prince Rupert of the Rhine is the current one.
Oh, okay. Yes, yes. I
So
have a very very soft spot for him in my heart. Yes. Wow.
thoroughly
Oh
enjoying that
gosh.
one.
Well, I'm not surprised. That is an amazing subject. He's one of the the great heroes of, well, okay, I might be getting into that zone of yeah, okay. So he had some flaws. Yes. Yeah, there, that's better. They're unbalanced.
Yeah.
There.
Yeah, definitely. But on this, I'm actually going to try and focus more on the women in his life, which I think have had no voice really before.
Yes.
And but the difficulty is trying to find out more information about them. It's always
Mm.
difficult, but there are things there. So hopefully that can be a bit of a different slant, as well as new research that's happening all the time, and then trying to decode some ciphered letters.
Oh, that's
Had a go
fun.
at that. So
Oh, well, I'm hopeless at that. So good luck. Good luck with all that.
well, I'll not claim to sort of decipher them, in any other way than just sort of building up a code from, what snippets of the code have been um, decoded by contemporaries, and just building
Mhm.
that together through different letters and collections and archives. So yeah.
That's great. That sounds wonderful. Uh, are you do you have a possible date that you might have this finished? Maybe next year, year after that?
Yeah, so definitely got to be finished this year,
Oh,
the
right.
first half of this year.
Okay.
So I think publication, I might be wrong, but it probably might edge into perhaps January 25. So
Right.
I don't think it would be this year. I think it might just
Mhm.
edge into start of next year.
Right. Well, that's something to look forward to, definitely. I definitely want to read that. Yeah. um, yes. Okay. Well, is there anything else you'd like to share with us today, Mark?
I think other than that, definitely more Cavalier Cast YouTube channel that I've just started. So I'm going to
Oh, I didn't
get
know that.
started on that.
How
Just got
exciting.
one video on there at the minute.
Mhm.
Yeah, but apart from that, I think that's everything.
Right. Well, I think that 2024 might be the year. I say this every year that the Stuarts really, get there, instead of being in forever in the shadow of the Tudors. So we'll
Definitely.
see. Yeah, it's time. It's
It
time.
is.
Okay. All right. Thank you so
But
much for joining us today, Mark.
thank you.
And
I tell you what, I will just say, I love how, Stuart Saturday and this just brings together the 17th century communities, so
oh,
big
that's
thank you from
good.
everybody for that. I
Oh,
mean,
thank you. And thank you for being so wonderfully dressed. Yes, I love
yeah.
it.
Well, as we know, we were doing the test and I was in modern gear, and then I thought, actually, what am I doing? Why am I here in modern gear? Get
Yeah.
this on. The only thing is
Well,
the
I love it.
headset.
Yeah, maybe you could get one as, like a helmet.
Yeah.
One of those that makes it look like it's a helmet.
That's a really
You
good
can have
idea.
this. You can invent it. That would be great.
Yeah.
I think of this as like my one chance to dress up the way I like to dress. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Um, okay. And to our audience, thank you so much for spending some of your Saturday with us. And don't forget, you can get your own copy of Mark's book about Charles I in Kindle and hardback now from the Pen and Sword History website, Amazon, or your preferred bookseller. Thanks as well to all the listeners of the 17th Century Lady podcast. Thanks to my director and producer, Gavin. And I am so happy to be here. And thank you for spending your time with us. We'll see you next time on Stuart Saturday. In the meantime, keep it Stuart.